So when I play, so I've combined these into one, like these two are now one stereo input. So because your keyboard has stereo outputs. And I'll make sure. We'll double check that they have the same. There we go. Cool. One of your second channels turned up way louder than the first one, so now they match for the keyboard. I'm not sure why we're not hearing the keyboard. That's...
Yeah, no, me too. Does it need to run through Logic?
Shouldn't. So we're seeing the input on the channel, which is good. I don't need that EQ right now.
Is that because the Vintech isn't?
No, this isn't even connected to the Vintech. I want to figure. I want to start with something that we know what's going on.
That tool was there for me to control that, and so I struggled with it. But how about the bass, though?
Well, that's coming out on A.B input 1, which is this guy right here, and it's also muted.
There we go.
So this way you could practice and just by... oh, it was probably muted so that it didn't have duplicated inputs. Okay. Cool.
So it was a default function? Is that?
Yes, so it probably didn't want to... Like, if you have, like... it probably muted it so that you don't have your direct inputs feeding your outputs at the same time as what you're doing in Logic. That might have been why that is that way. I want to make a new Logic session.
Okay.
I'm going to click on Logic because I know how Mac works. Sorry.
Who does your guitar maintenance?
I go to a guy named Big E. He's in Sparks. Great guy. Is this...
You can just quit that.
Okay.
I expect to be using that at some point. But he's good?
Yep. Let's do...
You know?
Yeah. There. So, is there a... we could probably turn down the volume on this guy, so we're not clipping. Okay, now they're together again. I feel like I'm only hearing this guy.
Really?
Yeah. Sorry, could you hold this for just a second? Thank you.
Thought you'd never ask.
This one might be louder. Let me make sure.
Well, it wasn't when I was using it in the Logic session as you arrived today. But I have seen that, and I've never understood it. So it's not the first time I've noticed that.
Alright, the input sensitivity of the speakers is the same. So let's double check. Let's double check the software, or our firmware.
Do you need this anymore?
Yes. Sorry.
No problem. I'll just be right over here if you need me. My favorite lines.
I just okay. Might be. Let's check the cables. So this one is sounding like it should. I think I brought my cable tester. Do you have a cable tester? Do you have a electrical multimeter with a continuity function?
If I do, I'm unaware of it.
Alright, so let's try testing this with a different cable and see if the same results occur. You have another XLR cable handy somewhere?
Well, there's quite a few of those, I guess, because of the drum setup. So you can grab those. They're quite lengthy.
That's okay. We just need to test it to see if the level changes.
Okay.
Because if the level changes from changing the cable, that tells us there's something wrong with that cable that we were using. But if there is no change.
As I mentioned, you know, I had this context of the mix, right? I mean,
Oh yeah.
So you can listen to it all day and get a really nice sound, but it may not work in the context of the mix. Isn't that right?
Exactly. So that's my estimate. Let's see how that pairs up with our... This is the part where the mixing comes in.
And that cello part is critical to this bass part.
Okay, so I need to make a few changes here.
You can go ahead and work with the cello part too, right? As long as we're at it.
Sure. But by making like some fine adjustments, it's a lot quicker than going through manually bringing out every single transient.
Oh, tell me about it. Yeah, no, I don't like having to use it, but and I was a little surprised that in those parts where I did automate, that it was necessary because, you know, I was recording the same volume, the pick. You know, I was a little surprised that those areas that you could see in the automation were even necessary to change. Totally. And I was pretty sure compression was going to get to it, but
one thing that we can also do is we can kind of bring out some of the, or bring down some of the kind of low information around here that will be fighting with our bass. And we can bring up some of our more mid-rangey information.
And I've played with that too, but yeah. But what about this trail here? I mean, shouldn't there be some? Shouldn't that lift up just a little bit based upon the?
If you're making it, don't fall into. It's really easy to fall into the trap of, well, this doesn't look right. If it sounds right, that's what matters.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
So do you want more high end?
I don't know. I'm only asking.
Totally. we could make the
well, and again, it would have to be
more
in the
narrow.
context of the entire mix.
Exactly.
And this thing is very, very
Complicated.
complex.
Yeah. What we can also do is we can also move these guys a little bit to the side, and that'll help the bass kind of punch through a little bit too. In fact, now the bass is kind of overwhelming. So I can do
Now,
this.
take it out of solo. Let me hear it in the context of the arrangement that I've got. It's a rough mix, but...
Muted.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you know, we're probably a few months off from working with this yet.
For sure.
But
Yeah.
because we've got Paris to finish, we've got to get drums on this, because those drums are just samples. And I've got to get my kit ready to get that going in.
Right.
So, but I mean, is this exciting or what? You know,
Yeah.
if the Historical Society of Turkey liked
The previous
that iteration,
yeah.
you can imagine what they do with this thing.
Exactly. Anything else you want to take a look at on this one?
Probably not in this project.
Okay.
I did want to be able to hear it kind of and understand how to use that guitar rig 6.
Oh, yeah. So let's go back to soloing our guitar rig, or our bass here. So, do you have a lot of experience kind of messing around with the different amps and like what a different amp sound like? Cool.
That's what Guitar Rig 6 is all about.
Exactly. So what we could, so this is one of our bass amps.
There's only a couple of them there, as I noticed.
Yes, there's this. We have Bass Invader and Bass Pro. Let's see here, but that doesn't mean you couldn't throw one of these other ones on there if you really wanted to.
Sure. Yeah.
In fact, this Tweedman is based off of Fender Bassman,
yeah,
which is supposed to be a bass amp, but it got really
right.
So you could throw that on there. But what's really cool is that it gives you the ability to mix and match. So for instance, what I could do, could get rid of that guy and throw this Bass Invader on, which is more. So this is based off of a.
I read this too, and I can't remember it either.
It is no, it's a Mesa Boogie. Subway.
That's right. Yeah.
This is based off of an Ampeg because it's got the same contour controls, and so let's not do that. Yeah. A little bit of a crunchier, kind of more distorted sound, but which we can so there's different gain stages for amplifiers. This one over here, the master volume is the volume of the overall thing. What happens? So originally, amplifiers were supposed to be as clean and distortion free as possible, right? Like think of like
the default level.
Yeah, like after World War II, like that kind of like big band guitar playing, right? But what people discovered was that as you turn up the input volume stage, you get more distortion, and you can like turn this up and turn that down, and now it's way more distorted, right? So you can by playing with those, by changing the relay, so when you make the input gain more sensitive, you introduce more distortion, and you can compensate for that change in volume with the master. The EQ in the middle kind of does that EQ is just an EQ. Generally, if it's in the middle, it's not boosting or cutting. If it's lower, it's cutting. If it's to the right, it's boosting.
Sure.
This boost up here, let's find out what that does.
Okay.
So that's like a high mid kind of frequency band. Other amps will call that presence.
Okay.
And the reason why it's separated from the rest of the EQ section is because because of the way amplifiers are built, the presence knob was an EQ band, but it was related to the. So there's two halves of an amp. There's a preamp section, which is your input volume and your EQ, and then there's the power section, which is a second amplifier that actually drives the speaker cabinet. And generally, the presence control was in the power amp section. That's why it's a separate
Now I'm very fond of the overdrive sound on electric guitar.
Sure.
So how would you use those to control that? Not that we'll get to that today. But
absolutely. Like for instance, if we had just like a new.
It's clean, but it's still the presence or quality.
Like subtle kind of like breakup.
Is that yours? Now the fun begins, huh?
Well, I wanted to keep myself busy while you had your call.
Because I did want to get to this.
Yeah, we can finish up with Guitar Rig Pro, for instance. Do you have a guitar you'd like to plug in and experiment with?
No.
Okay.
We'll put that off till I have an immediate need for it.
Okay.
I'd rather do this, actually.
Okay.
Those, that acoustical material,
Yes.
that has to go up too.
Ideally.
Yeah. And I'm thinking the biggest problem right there in that corner is that television monitor.
Probably.
So if I get something to cover the monitor, that would take care of it, right?
Depends on what covers it.
Yeah,
if it's
but I mean,
like a moving blanket or so, like
Yeah.
maybe a couple moving blankets on top of each other, maybe.
Yeah.
It's tough to say though. It could be. I mean, for all we know, there could be a screw that's like not quite tightened all the way, and every time you hit the snare, it rattles.
Yeah. Yeah, it will take some work, but.
I'm also gonna make an input list for the drums. So Doc